们很有福气。
We are very blessed.
I don't have a stand. We have 2 meals already.
我们已经吃了2餐。
圣餐是纪念主。
Our communion is to commemorate our Lord.
现在吃神的话语，是我们属灵的粮食。
And right now we're having our spiritual meal through His words.
Well, I saw several little kids here. Oh, they're leaving. They don't want to listen to my boring message.
小孩子是去用洗手间，要上洗手间。
我们基督徒真是有福气。
We are truly blessed as Christians.
这一个月是很重要的一个月。
This month is indeed very significant.
2000多年以前，这个月所发生事情，改变整个世界的前途。
2000 years ago, an event had occurred 2000 years ago that had changed the history of mankind.
耶稣基督为我们受死。
Jesus had died for our sins.
3天以后从死里复活。
After 3 days, He rose from the dead.
让我们能够有这个得救的盼望。
That He gave us hope of resurrection of salvation.
也能够享受他赐给我们各样属灵的福气。
And in this hope, we partake of all the blessings He has in store for us.
我相信我们很多人都看过一幅相片、照片是画片，很出名的。
I'm pretty sure most of you have at least glimpsed a very famous painting.
就是主耶稣基督最后晚餐这一幅画片。
And that is a painting of His Last Supper, the Lord's Last Supper.
就是在15世纪，一个意大利的图画家，他的名字是阿里拉多·迪·文森特，画了这一幅《最后晚餐》。
And this painting was painted by Leonardo da Vinci in the 15th century.
那么今天呢，我再告诉你们另外一个晚餐。
And today I want to share with you another Lord's Supper.
我不晓得有没有个画家把这个晚餐画成一幅图画。
There probably are paintings of this particular supper. It's just not very well known.
我就盼望你用你的脑海来思想，这个晚餐是特别有意义的。
So I encourage everyone to actively use your imagination to capture this particular supper that I want to share with you.
这个晚餐是在主耶稣基督最后晚餐前2-3个晚上。
And this particular meal had taken place a couple of days before Jesus was put to death.
在这个晚餐当中，有一个女人，我们后来晓得是玛利亚，用那个香膏膏抹主耶稣基督。
And in the course of this meal, a woman had approached and perfumed Jesus' feet with very expensive perfume.
这一段事情记在3本福音书里面。
And this incident was recorded in 3 separate Gospels.
马太福音26章记载。
It was recorded in Matthew's chapter 26.
马可福音也记载，就是我们今天所要讨论的。
It was recorded in the Gospel according to Mark.
最后呢，在约翰福音也有记载。
As well as the Gospel according to John.
他们3本福音记载多多少少有一点不一样。
And in the 3 recollection of this or retelling of this particular incident, there was a minor detail that was different.
马太跟马可都记载那个晚餐是在一个长大麻风的西门家里的。
And In the Gospel of Mark and Matthew, it was said that this particular incident had happened in the home of Simon the leper.
主耶稣基督在世的时候，很多人用这个名字的 Simon。
And while in Jesus' time, in his contemporaries, the name Simon is actually a very common name.
好像我的名字，英文名字，很多人就 Franklin。
Just as my name Franklin is not all that unique.
所以我有的时候 ，Franklin 是个懵懂的牧师。
And so sometimes I say the Reverend Franklin is not all that refined in his knowledge.
所以那个西门呢，一定以前长大麻风，耶稣基督已经医好他了。
And so to differentiate this particular Simon from the myriad of Simons at that time, he was identified or known as Simon the leper, who was cured by Jesus.
那个时候呢，也有一家人呢，不晓得是西门的亲戚啊，还是好朋友，他也想为耶稣基督有一个晚餐。
And at that time, the relatives or maybe close friends of Simon, they wanted to hold a dinner party for Jesus.
我们东方人呢，远行呢，都要有一大餐人送这个人远行。
And in our culture, our Chinese culture, it is tradition that whenever someone is getting ready to embark on a journey, that you would have a great big dinner to send this person off.
玛利亚大概她预料到耶稣基督快要远行了，离开世界了。
And this woman Mary had probably realized that Jesus is about to embark on a journey away from this world.
所以她也想有一个晚餐为耶稣基督送行。
So she wanted to have a meal to send Jesus forth.
我们中国人还有一样这个传统啊，有人从远方回来呢，我们有一顿饭给他洗成的。
And in the Chinese tradition also, when this person comes back from a journey, we also have the practice of having a welcome home meal.
那他们两家人呢，都想有请耶稣基督吃饭。
And so there are two families or two separate groups of people who want to have Jesus over for dinner.
我猜想啊，玛利亚、马大、拉撒路他们一家呢，这地方不够。
And I believe that in the home of Martha and Mary, maybe their house was not big enough.
所以西门的家呢，可能比较大一点的。
And so the house of Simon the leper was maybe bigger.
所以他们就在这个长大麻风的西门家里举行这个最后一个晚餐。
And so the dinner was they decided to hold a meal at the home of Simon the leper.
那么在吃饭的时候呢，马可都记载，有一个女人拿着一瓶很名贵的真拿大山的香膏，打破这个玉瓶来抹耶稣基督的头。
And so in the Gospel of Mark and Matthew, it says that a woman who was unidentified, this woman came in and broke an alabaster jar of a very expensive nard perfume and used it to pour it on Jesus' head.
这个香膏是非常名贵的。
This nard perfume is something that is very, very expensive.
这个女孩子省了差不多1年的工资，才能积存这个钱买到这样这个香膏。
To be able to buy something this expensive costs nearly a year's wages.
他就要打破莫耶稣基督，高莫耶稣基督。
And without hesitation, she broke the jar of this hugely expensive perfume and extravagantly used it to pour it on Jesus' head.
约翰福音很清楚地告诉我们说，是玛利亚做这样的事情。
In the Gospel of John, he records that Mary had used perfume on Jesus.
那么打破以后呢，这些门徒看见了，哎呀，这样浪费的啊！
And when she did that, the disciples were very dismayed at her extravagance.
他们就批评他说：“这样啊，你可以卖给人，用30两银子买一些食物的周济穷人，不是很好吗？”
And they said, "Why this wastefulness? Because with this perfume, you could have sold it for a year's wages and used that money in turn to help the poor."
他们就批评他，埋怨他。
And so they admonished her harshly.
我们男人呢，很懂得数钱的。
Because you know, usually the male among us are more practical, and they would think this way.
他们也很省钱的。
So they're more economical and more frugal.
我的儿子喜欢买东西，从什么地方买？从eBay买。
And when we want to buy something in order to bargain shop, a lot of us would resort to buying things off eBay.
从eBay买啊，就是人不要的东西就卖给别人，价钱很便宜的。
And sometimes we even unload the things that we don't want anymore on eBay to sell them off cheaply.
我的儿子买了一个手提的电话给我。
And to share with you, my son had bought me a cell phone, a mobile phone.
这个电话手提电话200多块钱。
And it retails for about $200 some.
我就说儿子，你为什么买这样贵的东西给我啊？
And so I asked my son, why do you spend so much money to buy something so expensive?
他说，若是我买一个系列，最低限度也要700块钱啊。
And he said, you know, this is actually the retail that I paid for a used one. If I were to buy you a brand new one, Dad, it would have cost me about $700 some.
所以他省了很多钱。
So in comparison, he had actually saved a lot.
但是女人买东西不从eBay买的，从那最好的Galleria 那个商店买的。
But comparatively, a lot of women don't like to shop on eBay. They actually prefer to shop from the designer boutiques.
所以有的时候我内人给我买东西呢，他是最好的地方来给我买。
And so whenever my wife buys something from me, she would always go to the place where she knows sells the best stuff, the authentic stuff.
我就心里想，太破费了，太破费了。
But in my heart, I always felt like that was a very big extravagance.
但是妇女呢，就是这样，懂得什么是好东西。
But you know what? That is the difference between men and women sometimes is that women will spare no expenses.
好了，我们回到这里来看一看马可福音记载这个抹香膏的事情。
And so let's come back to the Gospel of Mark at this particular incident where this woman had used the perfume and poured it on. So his disciples and those in attendance said, "It is such a waste. What a wasteful act."
可是耶稣基督呢，替他来辩护。
But yet Jesus stood up and defended this woman.
他说：“穷人常与你们同在。”
He admonished his disciples, saying, "The poor you will always have with you."
你们也要帮助他们，随时随地都可以。
And so anytime that you want to help the poor, you can.
但是玛利亚所做的事情呢，是特别不同的。
But what she has done for me is something that is very different.
她为我做了一件美事。
What she has done a wonderful thing.
什么是美事呢？
So what do you think? What is this wonderful thing?
美事就是本身就是很美的。
This beautiful deed is a deed that holds beauty in its own.
普通事情所谓美呢，是从外貌来看很美，但是不是里面的美。
A lot of times we may have a standard of beauty that is very superficial. We see something that is pleasing to the eye or pleasing to the senses. We say that's beautiful.
多年以前，有一个弟兄有一套这个饭桌子，有一些椅子，太旧了，他要打算呢送给那个 Goodwill， 卖给 Goodwill 也好。
And many years ago, there was a brother who had a dining room set where the table, the chairs, they were all quite worn, and he wanted to get rid of them. So he was thinking of either selling them to Goodwill or just donating them.
我们听了以后，不要送，不要送，送给我们好不好？
So when I heard of this, I said, "Oh, please, 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 could you just give them to me instead?"
我们拿回来以后呢，我看一看，真是应该送到这个 Goodwill 去了。
But yet, when I hauled the dining room set home and took a closer inspection, then I realized, boy, oh boy, did he have to donate this. I think I'm going to donate it myself.
后来呢，我想一想，我们也需要啊。
But on second thought, at that time, we really needed a dining room set.
于是我怎么样呢？把这个油漆呢擦干，把它除掉。
So what we did was we stripped the dining room set of its original paint.
于是呢，我再用油漆把它油上去，好看一点。
And we refinished, revarnished and refinished the wood to make it more presentable.
于是我们还拥有现在。
And you know what? To this day, I'd probably say I still have the same dining room set and it is still in service.
若是你到我的家，我要告诉你，这一套是我经过擦了以后，油漆以后，变成好像是新的一样。
And so if you were to come to my house, I can show you the dining room set and you can see all my effort had paid off. It looks almost new. It's very presentable.
这个是外在美，不是内在美。
But I tell you, all this varnishing is merely on the surface. It is a very superficial beauty.
又有一次，我们教会一个姐妹，她要换那个家里的沙发。
And another time, there was a sister from the church who wanted to get rid of her living room set, all the sofas and chairs.
我们到她的家看一看，她说我要把它送给别人。
And so when we went to visit her, she pointed out the sofa and said, "I'm planning on donating it to
我
get
说
rid of."
这样好的沙发送给我们好不好？
And again, I said, "Oh my goodness, this looked like a very good couch. Don't get rid of it. Just give it to me then."
所以她就把这套沙发送给我们了。
So she had some movers, arranged to have some movers to take the couch over to my house.
这一套沙发非常美好，我不需要做什么东西。
And I tell you, the sofa is just really, indeed perfect because I didn't even have to refinish it or reupholster it.
这个是内在美，不是外在美。
So I'll tell you, this particular sofa has inner beauty. It's something that I didn't have to do to make it any better.
所以玛利亚做了一件事情，门徒都说她太浪费。
And so when Mary did this particular action, she was criticized for being too extravagant, being too wasteful.
但是耶稣基督为她辩护，他说在我身上是做了一件美事。
But Jesus defended her in saying, what she has done is a beautiful thing.
我想跟大家思想有几点的，在耶稣基督的眼前呢，什么是一件美事？
And I want to bring your attention to a couple of details to see what about this deed was beautiful in Jesus' eyes.
为一个所爱的人，用一点钱财牺牲一点所做的事情是美事，不是浪费。
So for a loved one, for a beloved, when you spare no expenses to do something sometimes even outrageous, it is indeed a beautiful thing.
玛利亚他们马大跟拉撒路之家经历了很奇妙的事情。
And the family of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus had experienced something nothing short of miraculous.
当他们的兄弟拉撒路死去以后，
When Lazarus died from an illness,
他们就把他送到那坟墓里面，
they had buried him.
放在一个洞里面，把这个石头放在前面。
He was buried in a cave that was sealed off by a big rock.
两个姐妹都很伤心，
Both sisters were heartbroken
他们派人呢去请耶稣基督来帮助他们。
because even as Lazarus had laid sick before he died, they had sent forth people to ask Jesus to come because Lazarus had been sick.
但是耶稣基督没有马上的来，他故意停留一段时间。
But Jesus, instead of removing himself immediately from wherever he was to come to the aid of Lazarus, had intentionally delayed his return.
等到耶稣到了报道尼的时候，他们两姐妹都遇见耶稣基督的时候，抱怨了。他说：“主啊，你若是早一点来，我们的兄弟不会死了。”
By the time Jesus arrived in Bethany, Lazarus had been dead for about 4 days. And Martha told Jesus, "Oh Lord, if you only had been here, he would not have died."
耶稣基督告诉他们：“不会在我，生命也在我。”
And Jesus had admonished Martha, saying that the resurrection is in me.
虽人死了，也必复活。
Even though he died, he will rise again.
所以耶稣基督到这个坟墓前时候呢，就喊着说
And Jesus came to Lazarus' tomb and stood at the mouth of the tomb. He had people remove the boulder, and he stood at the mouth of the tomb and he called out,
拉撒路出来。
"Come out, Lazarus."
然后那个死人呢就出来了，拉撒路出来。
And Lazarus came out.
若是耶稣说死人出来，可能很多的死人都复活了。
And if Jesus had not said specifically Lazarus, if he said, "Oh, you dead one, come forth," maybe a lot of zombies would come out.
所以他说拉撒路起来。
So he called Lazarus by name. He said, "Lazarus, come forth."
所以这一家是经历耶稣基督很重要的，使他们的兄弟从死里复活，所以他们很感激耶稣基督。
And so this family had experienced such a great miracle, and they were very grateful to Jesus indeed.
所以玛利亚趁这个机会打破玉瓶来告耶稣基督，不是浪费，乃是做了一件美好的事情。
And so when Maria had broken the bottle of perfume and perfumed Jesus, it was not an act of extravagance. It was something that she felt he rightly deserved.
我看过一个故事是这样说。
I have read one way of telling this story.
在每一个大城市里面，都有一些救治醉酒的醉猫人，给他们吃、给他们睡、给他们洗澡的一个地方，叫 Rescue Mission。
I read that in most big cities there are rescue missions for alcoholics. 那
有一个人呢，他在这个 救济所呢做了40年。
And there was someone who had volunteered and worked at a mission for 40 years.
有的人啊，朋友就问他说：“哎，朋友，这个工作太难了。”
And someone that he had met and became acquainted with asked him, "Don't you feel like this is a very hard and thankless job?"
他说：“这些人来的时候，身体都臭臭的啊。”
He said, "These people come in stinking drunk,
他
greedy,
们都想来吃东西，洗个澡。
and all they care is to come here to stuff their faces, eat some food, and maybe get a warm bath."
但是呢，这个人呢，负责这个救济所呢，他有一个机会传福音。
But the volunteer saw instead a chance at evangelizing.
他就告诉他的朋友说：“40年以前，我也是一个罪犯啊。”
He said, "Don't you wouldn't know it, but 40 years ago, I was one of the drunks who came here looking for help."
有一个晚上肚子饿了，找来找去，我就找到一个地方，他们就说：“啊，进来，吃饭。”
And I was homeless, aimless, wandering about, and I happened to walk past this shelter, this mission, and they invited me in. They said, "Come on in and grab you a warm meal."
我那天晚上我就进去了，
And so I came in that night,
吃了一顿很好的饭，
and I enjoyed a very nice, filling
洗
meal.
个澡，
I washed myself,
还有我参加一个聚会，
and I attended a meeting.
他们讲到耶稣基督神的爱，
And in that meeting, they told of Jesus' love.
我心里受感动，
And that has so touched me in my heart
我就接受耶稣基督到我的心里面去。
that at that very meeting, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior.
我马上就到我的重担完全掉下了。
And I felt immediately all the burdens of my sin, of my past, had all been taken off, was lifted off.
后来我就想了，我以后的日子应该做什么呢？
And as I sat there pondering my future,
我就后来决定，我还是开一个基督徒的醉酒猫那个地方。
I decided to open a mission that is Christian-oriented for these homeless drunks.
我要回报神对我这样大爱，帮助一些有苦难的人，好像我以前一样。
It's my way of paying forward God's mercy and His love for me.
弟兄姐妹，若是神在你的生命当中做了奇妙的事情，你有没有的感恩？ 做一些回报的事情的报答神。
And so, brothers and sisters, think of maybe an incident or some miraculous blessings that you have experienced from God, from Jesus. Do you, in consideration of these blessings, have a way of paying that forward?
第二点我要提到的，就是为一个所爱的人。 做一点事情，牺牲一点，这个不是一个浪费，乃是一件美好的事情。
And secondly, I want to encourage everyone that when you do something in the name of love, out of love for someone, it is not an extravagance, it is not at all wasteful.
玛利亚他们几个人真是爱耶稣。
And the sister
报在你的时候，都是到他们的家来拜访他们。
And every time Jesus passes through Bethany, he made sure to stop in their house to visit with them.
他们还记得，当拉撒路死的时候，耶稣基督到这个坟墓前面的时候，
They remember when Jesus had risen Lazarus from his death.
圣经记载了很简单的几个字。
The Bible, the Gospel had recorded of this event in very simple words.
英文呢只有2个字，我们中文呢比较长起来，耶稣哭了。Jesus
It
wept.
says Jesus wept.
哦，这一家真是经验到耶稣基督的爱。
And it is truly something, a love that they felt that Jesus had for them.
耶稣基督为他们哭了。
That Jesus wept for them.
所以现在玛利亚，她怎样爱耶稣基督，所以要做一些事情，别人很少做得到的，要回报耶稣基督的爱。
So Mary, she wanted to reciprocate Jesus' love. She wanted to be able to have a response to this great love that he has for her family. And so she chose to do something that not everyone can do.
有一次，有一个年轻的女孩子到一个卖衣服、卖布料的店呢，要买东西。
There was one young lady who had gone to a fabric store. She wanted to purchase some material.
那么她说我要买几码的布料呢？这个布料呢很响的，走来走去都是很响的。
And she said, I want to purchase a couple of yards of textile, and I want to make sure that this fabric, this textile that I get is a very noisy type of fabric. Like whenever I move, it makes noise.
还有呢，这个颜色要白色的。
And I want the color, it has to be white.
那么这个卖布料这个人说，很少人要买一些布料的，声音很大的，叽叽叽叽叽叽。
And so the person, the salesperson at the fabric store thought that was kind of strange because it's very rare that anyone wants noisy cloth.
最后呢，找来找去，找到一块布料了，真是很响的。
So they searched throughout the entire store's inventory and finally found this one roll of textile that was indeed quite noisy.
那个卖布的老板说：“嘿，小姐，你为什么要买这样的布料？”
So the salesperson asked the young lady, "Why do you want something like this?"
他就告诉这个老板说。那个女孩子告诉这老板说
And this young girl said,
不久我要结婚了。
she says, I'm going to get married soon.
我的未婚夫呢是瞎眼的，
My husband is blinded.
所以我买这个布料，那个声音很响的。我走进一个这个讲坛上，他可以听见我的听见了，来了。
I want this particular type of cloth to make a dress so that my blind groom can hear me as I approach the altar.
所以呢，他就不会害怕，以为我的最后呢要跑掉了，跟他结婚了。
And he will not worry that I got cold feet and did not come.
所以他买一个很贵的，很少人用这个布料呢，来做一个wedding gown。
And so she spared no expense and spared no effort in hunting for the perfect material to make her wedding gown for this groom she loves.
为所爱的人所做的事情，所谓浪费的，不是浪费，是一件美事。
So when you do something for your beloved and you spare no expenses at expressing your love through the action, it is truly a beautiful thing.
第三点我要提这个，
And the third point I want to bring your attention to.
为一个所爱的人，最后做一件事情，用很大的代价的付上做一件事情，不是浪费，是一件美事。
When you know that this is the last thing that you will get to do for someone that you love deeply, and you spare no expenses in getting that act done, it is a beautiful thing.
玛利亚有预感，门徒都不晓得啊，耶稣基督快要死亡了。
Though Jesus had, in some ways, foretold his death, Mary took it to heart, while the disciples still thought nothing of it, and the men did not believe. But yet Mary knew that this was going to be the last thing that she was going to be able to do for
所以
Jesus.
他为着爱主耶稣基督，最后为他做一件事情，把这个香膏抹在耶稣基督身上，这一件是美事，不是浪费。
So she knew that this was going to be the ultimate, the last act, the last expression of love that she would get to perform for Jesus, whom she so loved. And she spared no expense in breaking open this jar of perfume that cost a year's wages and just pouring it on.
多年以前，我们教会有一个寡妇，有个女孩子生病。
Many years ago in our church, there was a widow in our church who had fallen ill.
她这个女孩子身上的那个白血球过多症。
And she had leukemia, where her white blood count was abundant.
所以小孩子生这个病呢，没有多大的盼望。
And and she was a very young. She was the daughter of a widow, and usually when children get leukemia, the prognosis for them is not great.
可是很可惜，她的头发呢完全掉下来了。
And during the course of her treatment, the chemotherapy to treat her leukemia, she lost all her hair.
但是这个小孩子呢很爱美。
And this little girl, like all little girls, wanted to be pretty.
她要妈妈买一顶帽子给她戴在头上。
So she asked her mother for a hat so that she can wear it to cover her baldness.
你想怎样呢？每一次她妈妈去医院看她的时候，都买一顶新的帽子给她戴。
And so this widow, though she was the only person working, the only provider for this little girl who was sick in the hospital, and she had a lot of medical expenses, but still, without hesitation, each time she goes in the hospital to visit her child, she would come with a new hat.
她妈妈想，这一次我给她的帽子可能是最后一次给她。
Because she said, I don't know when the hat that I bring in would be the last.
你看，为一个所亲爱的人，最后做一件事，不是浪费，是件美事。
So to do something beautiful when you know that it is probably going to be the last thing that you ever get to do for that person that you love, that is truly a beautiful thing.
还有一样呢，我要补充的提到的是玛利亚没有想到的。
And additionally, I want to add something that Mary had probably not considered.
以上3点的玛利亚都是为着感激耶稣基督。
I believe that she had probably in her heart done this deed because she wanted to give thanks.
为着爱主耶稣基督，她做这件事情。
In response to Jesus' love that she had done this.
为着耶稣基督，她最后做一件美事。
And she did this out of her love for Jesus, and also as her last expression of love for Jesus.
但是耶稣基督加上一样非常重要的。
But you know what? Jesus had added something tremendously priceless.
在那个马可福音的14章第9节说：“我实在告诉你们，普天之下，无论在什么地方传这福音，也要述说这女人所做的，以为纪念。”
That Jesus had made her expression of love into a legacy. For verse 9, he says, I tell you the truth, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her.
这个福音呢有2面。
And so this gospel is two-sided.
一面是神怎样爱我们，他的儿子为我们受死。
The first side, you can see God's love for us, that He has given up His only Son to die for us.
我们都很强调这一点。
And this is something that we emphasize on.
但是当我们信主以后，我们马上要转到这里另外有一面。
But as we accept the salvation of His blood, we should also look on the other side of this act.
耶稣基督说：“以后你们往普天下传福音，都要提出述说这女人所做的事情，做一
That
个
we
纪念。”
must remember Mary's legacy. We must retell her expression of love for Jesus.
耶稣基督来到世界上为我们受死。
So we know that Jesus came because of His love for us, to die for us.
我们信主已经跟神建立美好关系，我们也应该学习怎样爱神、爱耶稣基督。
And so as we accept the salvation, we must learn to be able to respond to Jesus in love, with love.
我们从这边看见神为我们做了很奇妙的事情。
Because we can see that Jesus has accomplished the most divine feat for us.
我们这一辈人也问问自己：我到底为神、为耶稣基督做了什么事情？
So what wonderful thing can you do for Jesus?
这一面我们看见神给，
Because on one side you can see God has given you, you have chosen to receive.
我们这一面呢，我给神什么？
So in your reception, what do you have to give back in return?
所以弟兄姐妹们，我们要思想这一方面。
So let us all think on this.
我们有生之年应该怎样用我们的时间、金钱、才干来服侍主？
Because we want to be able to think truly how we can reciprocate God's love and pay His love forward while we are still living, breathing, and able.
Using our talent, our treasure, our time 来服侍主。
To use our talent, our love, our time, 用我们的才能，用我们的爱，用我们的本事和时间来服侍主。
我不盼望我们这个教会就是这样停留在这个地步。
I don't want our church to be stunted at this stage.
我盼望我们这个教会不久把这个礼堂都充满人。
I want this church to grow.
我们地方不够，我们再盖一个更大的聚会地方。
That as we plan to expand, that space will truly be filled with souls who are saved.
这个需要你跟我回报神的爱。
And how do we find these souls? We have to actively go out and evangelize, go out and preach the gospel.
为神做美好的事情。
To do that wonderful thing, that beautiful thing for Jesus.
让我们同心祷告。
Let us pray.
主啊，求你亲自用你的话语来教导我们，
Lord, teach us with your word,
好让我们不是单单为自己、为家庭而活，
that we will not live selfishly only for ourselves or for our small family unit,
乃是为我们从死里复活的耶稣基督而活。
but rather that we live our lives